American teen throws newborn from Paris hotel window. When people think of Paris, they typically imagine the majestic Eiffel Tower, the romantic Seine River, or the Louvre Museum with its timeless artistic masterpieces. The City of Light is always associated with romantic and beautiful imagery. However, on a morning in early 2025, a tragedy occurred at the Ibis Styles Hotel that shocked not only the local community but also international public opinion. It was still early on Monday morning, around 6 a.m., when this small corner of Paris woke up to a nightmare. "I still shudder when I think about it," an Ibis Styles hotel employee shared with the Mirror. Requesting anonymity, they continued, "It was horrific. She gave birth in the room, wrapped the baby in a towel, and threw it out the window. The baby was still alive when taken for emergency care but didn't survive. We wonder what happened. It must have been a case of pregnancy denial." At the center of this tragedy is Mia McQuillan, an 18-year-old American girl from Oregon. McQuillan was on a gap year in Europe, participating in a program organized by EF Gap Year, an organization that specializes in experiential travel programs for young people between 18 and 22 years old. According to the organization's website, Gap Year programs are designed for students eager to explore the world beyond the classroom, providing a dynamic adventure full of discovery and cultural immersion. However, McQuillan's adventure ended in tragedy when she gave birth in her hotel room and then threw the newborn out the window. The baby fell from a height of about 30 feet, nearly 10 meters, with the umbilical cord still attached. Despite being taken to Necker Children's Hospital in Paris still alive, doctors were unable to save the infant. Immediately after the incident, McQuillan was arrested by Paris police and faced charges of infanticide. According to reports from the Daily Mail, she was placed in a psychiatric unit after being detained. The prosecutor's office stated that the possibility of pregnancy denial is being considered in this case. This incident has raised many questions about the complex psychological phenomenon known as denial of pregnancy, a rare condition that can lead to tragic consequences. Dr. Daniel Bobber, a forensic psychiatrist with extensive experience working with adolescents, explains, "This is really a very rare phenomenon. But I have seen cases like this before. This is what's called pregnancy denial. Although pregnancy denial is not classified as a separate psychiatric diagnosis, it is essentially a lack of recognition or awareness of pregnancy despite clear physical signs." According to Dr. Bobber, this phenomenon can occur for various reasons. People experiencing this condition often have a history of psychological trauma, may have experienced sexual abuse, domestic violence, and it frequently occurs with young people during their first pregnancy. Denial is the mind's way of protecting itself from excessive stress, often triggered by trauma, he explained. In many cases, experts observe the phenomenon of dissociation, a form of disconnection from reality, as the mind's way of protecting itself from overwhelming thoughts and emotions. This is basically a defense mechanism and it's very powerful. Dr. Bobber said, "People will look and say, 'How did she not know? She surely knew what she was doing.' But very often, these are not cases of premeditated murder. These are cases of extremely disturbed individuals who are overwhelmed, experiencing cognitive dissonance where they have two contradictory emotions. On one hand they know they're pregnant, but on the other hand they can't cope with it, so it can't be true." Although it's impossible to predict exactly which women will develop pregnancy denial, certain risk factors have been identified. The U.S. National Institutes of Health, NIH, states that there are various forms of pregnancy denial, including psychotic and non-psychotic variants. This condition is considered a red flag that should trigger a referral for psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Bobber points out that lack of prenatal care, lack of social support, and isolation are risk factors. In an 18-year-old like McQuillan, impulsivity, failure to consider future consequences, and magical thinking, believing that, if I make the problem literally disappear, I won't have to face it, may play important roles. "I don't think this was a cold, calculated, malicious murder," Dr. Bobber commented. "I think this was someone completely overwhelmed and unable to cope." One of the most shocking aspects of the case is the act of throwing the newborn out the window, an action considered violent and extreme. How can someone deny pregnancy but then perform such a definitive action? Dr. Bobber explains. This is probably someone who couldn't cope with the reality that they were pregnant. So they didn't feel a connection or attachment to the baby. And they could do that. He added that while no aspect of this case is anything but completely horrifying, especially when considering the act of discarding the child, there needs to be a professional assessment of the psychiatric or psychological aspects of the case. There may be psychological or cultural factors influencing McQuillan's behavior. She might come from an extremely religious family where unwanted pregnancy is not accepted. She may have been living in secrecy, hiding from her family and even from herself. I think that to some degree, you can intellectually acknowledge that you're pregnant, but emotionally, you go someplace else in your mind. Dr. Bobber said, that's the dissociation we're talking about. The disconnection between thoughts and feelings. I think that would be very difficult for some people to understand. But the mind is a very powerful thing. The Mia McQuillan case poses complex legal and ethical challenges. The NIH points out that pregnancy denial involves challenging legal and ethical issues, including assessment of the mother's capacity, evaluation of the best interests of the mother and possibly the fetus, as well as the possibility of hospital detention. Most importantly is the connection between this condition and infanticide. The NIH notes that pregnancy denial has recently received media attention following a series of infanticides in France. In McQuillan's case, investigators will need to determine several important factors. The autopsy results of the child will determine the exact cause of death, whether the baby was born alive or had died before being thrown out the window. If the baby was born alive and killed after birth, the legal consequences could be more severe. Investigators may also examine McQuillan's social media, electronic communications, messages, emails, and other communications before the incident, as this could provide insight into her state of mind before the event. Although considered rare, McQuillan's case is not the only instance of pregnancy denial leading to tragic consequences. Dr. Bobber mentioned another case he was involved in, concerning an individual diagnosed with dissociative disorder, who was ultimately found not guilty by a jury. In recent years, there have been several high-profile cases involving teenagers concealing pregnancies, giving birth in secret, and subsequently being accused of killing the child. A famous case is that of Skylar Richardson in Ohio, who was ultimately acquitted of infanticide because the cause of the child's death could not be determined. The Mia McQuillan case continues to be investigated in Paris. She is currently in custody and facing charges of infanticide. Authorities are investigating the possibility of pregnancy denial and other psychological factors that may have contributed to this tragedy. The tragedy in Paris once again raises important questions about adolescent mental health, support for those with unwanted pregnancies, and the need for better education and awareness of these complex issues. It also emphasizes the importance of early recognition of warning signs and providing appropriate support for those at risk. While we wait for more information about this case, it's important to remember that behind the shocking headlines are stories of real people, individuals struggling with complex and sometimes incomprehensible psychological issues, leading to tragic consequences that no one wishes for.